question here that I'm really excited about. They asked, Dr. Steve, you mentioned that as a kid, you were a big Ronald Reagan fan. Then by college, you become a liberal until Rush Limbaugh steered you in a new direction. Can you tell us about your political journey? Were you ever a George Bush neocon? And were you ever more pessimistic about the possibility of a new conservative age? So, Dr. Steve, what's your origin story? Tell us about where you come from.
Well, that's a lot.
In about 5 minutes.
In 2 minutes or less. I go from the 18th century to here and now here. Well, yeah, I always loved politics as a kid. I was a strange kid. I always loved politics. I always loved music, art. I had a sort of polymath mind. Yeah, maverick, conception, of things. And I come from a family of scientists. My mother's a chemist. My father was a chemist. My grandfather was a chemist. My mother's father, my paternal grandfather's a doctor, a medical doctor. So I come from that side of the brain, as it were. And yet my paternal grandfather was also a pianist as well. So I have that side of working. And politics is just an interesting thing because politics deals with the police. It deals with society. And it's always been considered a healthy trait, a civic virtue, to be concerned about your civilization, to be concerned about the inheritance that you've received passed down to the next generations. So I loved presidents. I knew the whole of presidents. I could recite every president up to Nixon at one point, by memory. And I was just this weird kid who just loved that kind of stuff. And then when Reagan came on, I just loved his optimism. I thought Carter just looked so depressed all the time, and just loved the way Reagan spoke. Whenever I remember the election night, I had made a cup of coffee. I made a big pot of coffee. I was 11 years old, right? November of 1980. I was 11. I made a big cup of coffee, pot of coffee, because I thought I was going to stay up all night, even put on a tie. And I was so excited. I had a map of all the states to mark off, and it was over in an hour. It was like a Mike Tyson fight. I was like, wait a minute, I'm so excited for this, right? Yeah, Michael P. Keaton. That's Kim. Yeah, I guess so. I was kind of a Michael P. Keaton at 11 years old. Got into music and guitar. Stayed, I was an 80s kid. So, Reagan was awesome. We loved Reagan. And then I went to the music conservatory, and when I went to the music conservatory to pursue classical guitar, I was going to school with, this is back in 88. So I was going to school with people from Poland and from Russia, and from back then Yugoslavia, East Germany, Bulgaria, Hungary. And they were amazing. They were wonderful. I was very drawn to Eastern Europeans and Russians for whatever reason. I loved their spirit. But of course, there's a time when communism was still, it was on its last legs, And but when I hung out with the Americans, they were all leftists. They were all far leftists. Maybe that's why it's funny. Maybe that's why I liked the Eastern Europeans, because they weren't far leftists. They actually thought Americans were a little mamby-pamby. And so I don't know. I think just through the influence of Americans, maybe through the influence of my teacher, who's one of the greatest guitarists. He is the greatest guitarist in the world, but he's also very lefty as well. I guess you breathe in the culture that you're in. And I guess I was taught, if you're enlightened, if you're going to be considered smart and educated, you're supposed to be liberal. And so, and I mean, a lot of my teachers were gay. And so there was just the atmosphere was just one that if you were conservative, you were mean, or you were you had your eyes closed. You weren't seeing how things really are. You were repressed and you were repressive. And so I got really lefty. And so I was all for Clinton in 92. But by God's grace, it only lasted a couple of years because right after Clinton was elected, I was playing my guitar, and I did a whole thing for Rush. I did a live feed when it was announced that he passed away. And I remember practicing guitar at night at my apartment, and I'd have a little black and white TV with just a few channels on it. Remember them days? So this was 93. Clinton had just gotten into office. And I just remember this heavy set bravado guy coming on to a show in front of the studio audience. And he started just for 25 minutes straight, just railing on Clinton. And I thought, what the heck is this guy's problem? Give Clinton a chance, and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, I was too lazy to get up and walk over and turn off the channel. So I would just let it go. And I forget, I think I liked the show right before it. And he came on late. It was like 1 a.m. or something, 2 a.m. I don't remember. But as the weeks went by, I kept watching it. And all of a sudden, this pompous, arrogant jackass was turning into one of the most intellectually engaging fellows I had ever encountered on television. And he loved Ronald Reagan. And he told me why. And that's what made him so brilliant. He was able to juxtapose what Clinton was doing with what Reagan did, and why what Reagan did was so much infinitely better. And he convinced me. He converted me, as it were. And that's how I ended up getting very interested. Got interested again in religion. I tend to be a pretty religious kid, actually, growing up. Left it in my teens and in my college years, and I got very much back into it, into conservative Christianity as a result. When George W. Bush came onto the scene, I liked him a lot. I saw him as part of the Christian right. I saw him as a good pro-life leader and the like. And so I was for him. So I voted for Bush. I voted for him twice. But I knew something was wrong. I knew there was just something not quite right. And I talked to a lot of neocons who were Christians, and how they were trying to reconcile a neocon vision of life with Christianity. And I didn't buy it. It didn't work. And that's when I actually started reading a lot of Pat Buchanan. And Buchanan's nationalist populist traditionalism, it was like a light just turned on. I just went, this is it. This is stuff that can last for centuries here. I mean, this is not neocon globalism. Hey, we've never tried this before. Kind of a new kind of imperialism. This was something that really was rich and beautiful, and that touched everything. It touched borders, it touched economy, it touched tradition, and they all worked together. And so that's I remember I think it was around 2006, 2005, 2006. I couldn't. Bush was done in my mind. I couldn't reconcile the war anymore, Iraq, and then Obama came, and I knew he was going to destroy McCain. I mean, you could see that a mile away, and you just kind of go, well, the Republicans blew it. I mean, we were getting now the neoliberal version of the neocon vision of life. It's every bit this one size fits all globalist, literally anti-traditionalist conception of life. And I And I just said, well, there you go. I mean, and I was very pessimistic. I didn't see much happening there. That's also around the time I started coming across the post-secular studies at Durham University in the UK. So that have been around 2008, 2009, right around there. And those studies were saying actually things are getting much, much more religious. Globalism's on its last legs. It's starting to collapse, it's starting to fall. This is particularly Sam Huntington of Harvard. He was saying that in the 1990s. And I didn't really believe it, to be honest with you, but I was sure hoping it would happen. I was really excited. I knew it was happening in India and Russia and in Eastern Europe and all, but I didn't think it was going to happen in Western Europe or the States or anything like that. And then just sort of fast forward, and then Trump came on the scene, and I heard Pat Buchanan, I heard nation, culture. You know, I heard nation, economy, and culture. You know, I heard borders, I heard economic nationalism, I heard traditionalism, and I heard how they all interrelate with one another. If we are going to keep our traditions and our culture alive, we've got to bring our manufacturing jobs back home, because when they leave, neighborhoods and communities that have been around for decades end up disbanding and leaving as well. And if we're going to hold on to that culture, custom, tradition, we've got to secure our borders, because if you have open borders, eventually your values become open as well, because all these new values come in, and whatever you tried to protect is now dead. Open borders means open values. It all interrelated with each other. And then Brexit happened on June 23rd, 2016. And that's when I started to see we talked about this with Seb on Seb's program on Tuesday. That's when I started to see the EU begin to shrink. And for the first time, what made Brexit so amazing is for the first time I saw globalism shrink. Globalism started to shrink. And that's when the post-secular, post-globalist studies started kicking in. And then Trump won just a few months later, and I was home. I was politically home, and that's when we started our channel, November 1st, 2016, and it's been the most amazing ride ever since. So.